Hello and welcome to episode 1 of All Media Review. My name is Dennis and I am just doing this as a hobby. I'm not a professional at doing this at all, as you will clearly see as I go on with my ramblings and musings and whatnot. The purpose of this channel is to just review things that I see, read, hear, watch, whatever you want to know about media that I do. I used to be in the radio business. I worked part-time for well over 20 years, but I didn't really do anything much there. I was in a small mom and pop for the majority of my career. I worked for some bigger stations throughout the Boston area on a part-time basis here and there, but never anything big. So I'm just going out and doing this at this time just to see where it goes. The purpose is I will be reviewing movies that are theatrical releases, that are on streaming, and I may do a couple comic books here and there and a couple books every once in a while. I'm in the process of reading a series right now, and eventually I'll get through it. It's a long prodding series, so hopefully I'll get through it soon. And I will also review some shows here and there that I like, that I find interesting. Maybe you will too. If you like this stuff, maybe you want to subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, whatever you want to do, make a comment, and I will try to do my best to reply back to you. And that goes for every episode that I do. Anyways, today's review is on Mr. McMahon. It is a 6-part show on Netflix currently. It's a documentary on Vincent Kennedy McMahon, the former owner and CEO of the WWE, which was formerly known as the WWF. It starts from his childhood and goes all the way until he resigned recently due to some legal issues that he is going through. And I got to say that it was very eye-opening. If you're not familiar with what is happening to him currently, I will get to that, but it starts off from when he was a child, coming from nothing. He didn't know his father until he was 12 years old, allegedly, and he had to work his way through his father's business. Back in the day when he was first coming in, the wrestling world was not what it is today. There were different territories, and the WWF, as it was known at that time, was in the Northeast, which included New England, New York, and I believe Pennsylvania, and maybe a couple other areas. And there was all these different territories that had independent wrestlers that may have jumped back and forth here and there, but mostly stayed in their own territory. It wasn't until Vince McMahon Jr., or Vincent Kennedy McMahon as he is known, had a vision and actually bought his father out. He worked his way up all the way through the organization, and he eventually bought his father out, which is incredible. He is a self-made million/billionaire now, and his vision was revolutionary at the time of when he did things. They didn't have people nowadays that know wrestling have all this celebrity and all this fanfare. It wasn't like that back then. It was really underground. It was really just something that people would go, it wasn't what it is today. Let's put it that way. It wasn't as choreographed. It wasn't as, you need to have these big chiseled bodies and all this stuff happening. There wasn't many high flyers as it is. That evolved, and Vince McMahon was key to that evolution. He definitely was not without controversy, as you will hear coming up. He was the one that made what was called WrestleMania, or what is called WrestleMania, what it is today, the first one. He brought in people that you wouldn't think would have wanted to be in wrestling, but he brought in people like Cyndi Lauper. For those of a certain age, you know who she is, but if you don't know who she is a pop artist from the 80s up until the 90s, and she's still relevant today. You see her on commercials if you pay attention, but she had some big hits, and she was friends with this guy who was big in wrestling back in the day called Captain Lou Albano, and her and he became friends, and she went into the wrestling world. She did some little moves here and there, but she wasn't a wrestler, and she just had a lot of pull back in the day, and that drew in new eyes. Mr. T, he got Mr. T to come in. He got so many people. Aretha Franklin sang "Oh Beautiful," America the Beautiful, I think that's what it was, on WrestleMania 2 or 3. So he had some big names starting to come in that started to draw in all these new faces that really liked what they were seeing. So it just grew and grew and grew, and then he overtook other territories, and he just basically put people out of business, and he became what it is today. There was still competition, but it wasn't really in the 80s. There wasn't really much that could stop him. The 90s came, and this existing company, WCW, was still there. That was owned by a different billionaire named Ted Turner, who is the cable guru, cable news guy. If you want to go back, that's something to discuss, maybe another episode at some point, but not today. Anyways, WCW was on that, and WCW started taking over the ratings and was starting to become more popular. They started drawing people from the WWE, WWF back then. People like Hulk Hogan, Randy Macho Man Savage, Bret Hart, all went from WWE to WCW. Eventually, Vince took over WCW. He actually bought them. And there was another company called ECW, Extreme Wrestling Conference, or whatever they call themselves. He bought them. And then now there's basically no competition. There's a new not new, it's been around since 2019, called, I can't even think what it's called. Begins with an E. And I'm sorry about that, but they're pretty big. They're getting some ground. They have gained ground, but sorry about that. WWE is still the king. Ratings did drop for a while. There's been different eras that came in. Most notably was the Attitude Era, where you had Stone Cold Steve Austin, your The Rock. You had scantily clad women. That he did some bad things. Like, you watch it now, like I grew up watching it, and I remember I enjoyed it at the time, but now as I see it with older eyes, I look back at that and I'm like, what were they thinking? They did some things to women that were just utterly disgraceful, and I cannot believe I watched it and kept watching it. But eventually it went too far for me, and I stopped watching it. I haven't really paid attention to it since the early 2000s. And I guess they've changed. They've now gone back to, they wanted to get a PG rating, so they toned some rhetoric down. It's not something that I'm into anymore. But this series was really, really good, and I highly recommend this series. That is going to be what my final score is. Highly recommend this series, even if you're not into wrestling, but just are curious about this. If you're into wrestling, I definitely recommend this. You have to watch this. It goes over a lot of stuff. Some that is, I don't think it's breaking any new ground if you've really been paying attention the whole time to all this stuff, but it is definitely eye-opening if you haven't been paying attention, or if you don't know what it's all about. Anyways, I did promise you that I would talk about Vince McMahon's legal issues. He's not only once, but several times he's been brought up on charges for sexual harassment or sexual charges, and he's beaten them all, sort of. He's come to settlements with people and all that stuff. But back in 2021, 2022, when this documentary was still being filmed, and they note it all over every beginning of every episode, they tell you what was going on, and that most of this was done before these latest charges were brought to public. And then after they were brought to public, Vince did not continue the documentary, even though they kind of continue it without him. And they go on about what is said, and all the different reporters are in there, and going over things. And this last one that made him really step out of the business is still ongoing. It was some really disturbing charges. They get into detail a little bit. You can read it on the screen, and they do talk about it a little bit. in the last episode, in the last 20 minutes of the last episode, they get into that. So if you're watching it with your kids that are under a certain age, or you're not comfortable with that, being around your kids, I would not watch this in front of your kids at that last 20 minutes of the last episode. But anything else before that, maybe not, depending on what you deem is appropriate. But I don't think anything's too terrible there. I mean, like I said, they go through an era where they do things that degrade women a little bit, and I shouldn't say a little bit, a lot. And they do show a little bit of that here and there in the last couple episodes. So that might be something that you might want to avoid if you have little children running around. But other than that, yeah, it was an eye-opening piece, and I do highly recommend for those that like wrestling to watch this. And that's really my final thing there. As far as personally, I used to love wrestling because I used to watch it with my dad when I was young, and I wanted to continue that after my father died because that was something that we connected with. We didn't connect with much, but that one is something we connected with. And then, like I said, it went over the edge to me too much. Once I started really seeing things that I didn't agree with, I stopped watching it and stopped paying attention by watching, but I still kept up with it by reading things here and there, talking to people that are still into it, that still watch it. And I do still have a couple friends that still are into it, but they watch, they don't necessarily watch WWE or WWE anymore. They watch independent circuit. They go to independent circuits and they watch the other one that I cannot remember the name of. Anyways, and that is my review for today. That is conclusion, and these will get better as I go along, I do promise, and they will not be as long as this video. I do want to keep them within 5 to 7 minutes at the longest. So anyway, I do hope you enjoyed this. If you did like this video, please subscribe, make a comment, hit the like button, hit the dislike button if you didn't like it, and we'll see where it goes. I'm going to try to do these as often as I can. I was trying to keep to a once a week before on my previous channel that I had, but I'm just going to do these as often as I can. I can't promise a schedule at this time. Maybe as we get along, there'll be some more and I'll get more definitive. Anyways, thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you have a wonderful day.